is a D6 generation pip. Yeah, one of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a pip. You know, a short pip. Little something. Yeah, about anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today.
Hey everybody, it's been a while, so welcome back. We're going to be putting up another.
Don't call it a comeback, Craig. Don't call it a comeback.
Well, you have to go away to have it a comeback. Did I say it was a comeback? I said we are back, but anyway,
we're back from a nap. We're returned from a nap, a long nap.
Indeed, it was a long nap, but that's okay. We're back now. So Russ had this idea. Russ is going to. I think it's like a midlife crisis. I'm not sure, but Russ had this.
Deny that.
No, yeah, I mean, and being less than a year behind you, I think I'm right there with you. Like I did not share your initial vision, Russ. So this is a bit like a confessional. Okay. Your stated mission, of course, at the beginning was you wanted to get some friends together that might come from different sort of philosophical backgrounds and try to pick some topics that we could talk about and discuss and something that would that would go well and be something that we could all kind of talk about and see if a dialogue could be started, not changing anybody's mind, not, making any arguments, or more just like, is there a middle ground where a discussion can even take place? And as you said, your sort of secondary purpose was sort of to reconnect with friends that we don't get to game with very often. And I hadn't really thought about it. And of course we did it last night. And what we're going to talk about now is what you did and what your vision was and how it went. And I don't want to jump the gun.
Okay.
So I don't want to. So I'll just go ahead and let you talk from there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks that I may have left.
No, that's exactly right. So it was not really a very high-minded or noble thing. It really came from this idea that, so as Craig mentioned, I turned 50 this past fall, which I think is well past middle age, Craig. I'm not really sure you can claim to be middle age once you're 50.
Somebody alive on the earth right now will live to be 500.
No, I know. And my grandfather made it to 101, so it's definitely half for some.
You've got the genes.
Yeah, but I think you got to acknowledge you're old when AARP is reaching out to you and stuff. But
they start early. And it's offensive. It's offensive.
Right. So anyway, I feel like I had my midlife crisis on the show back when I turned 40, which means that's how long we've been doing this thing. Just FYI. When when Rafe and I bought our big gaming rigs and all that, remember that back in the day?
Yeah, I do.
So now, I feel like, getting older and a couple things are happening to me. And one of the things too is, I feel like as you get older, you become cognizant of the fact that you're turning into your grandparents. And you're kind of like, am I becoming a grumpy old man? Get off my lawn, and so you kind of hear your grandparents. I mean, who hasn't heard the grandparents say, back in the good old days, people were just civil to each other and they were kind, not like today. Of course, my grandparents were telling me that, in the 80s, right? Yeah. And now it seems like, to me, the 80s seem civil, right? And what is happening now? So that was happening. I was trying to figure that out. And then also, to your point, Craig, I wanted to kind of get back together and game with some folks I hadn't seen in a long time. And I'm still going pretty regularly out on Tuesdays and getting my Tuesday night game in. And I always have that, but I haven't seen a lot of other friends. And honestly, I've been kind of gearing my house up to play games with my daughters more. As they were getting older, I had more sort of an official gaming space. And I was like, man, it might be kind of fun to have my friends over at my house. So this is all kind of coming together, right? I kind of want to hang out with my friends more. I kind of like to host a little bit. And also, I'm kind of like, man, this politics thing is really bothering me. Now, before you worry, we're not going to talk politics in this episode. And I think we've done a pretty good job on the D6 generation of staying away from politics. Mm-hmm. Craig, there was only one time we had a political issue on the show.
Yeah.
And it was when, I don't know if you remember this, it was the closest time I think the show ever came to overtly talking politics was way back in the day. We did an episode where we said we preferred to wish Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays.
Oh, that was a mess.
And we actually lost the sponsor over that.
We lost the sponsor over that.
And that's really as serious as we ever got around politics, which, back then that may have been severely offensive, but I think in 2019, That's pretty low grade stuff.
Really.
Really, right? So I think we did a pretty good job. But at the same time, like I've seen a lot of our fellow podcasters, and I'm in no way being judgmental. Every once in a while, they feel compelled and motivated to use their podcast and their voice to advocate various things they feel passionate about. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I felt, Craig and I always felt that the D6G was really more a home of an escape. And so we wanted to keep it as an escape. But I wanted to share this with you guys because I'm not going to talk to you about a political view, or as Craig mentioned earlier, there was no intent to change anyone's mind. No. It was really an intent to see if I could better understand what other people were thinking. And maybe I thought it might be cathartic for me as well to see if they could understand what I was thinking, not in an effort to change their opinion, but is it possible for people to disagree and not think of each other as evil or have no moral character, right? And I think that's what I saw was changing. And just a couple personal anecdotes here, I think that other people might relate to. As the political climate kind of got heavy around the election of 2016, events came and went, and suddenly my one cousin wouldn't talk to me anymore, and suddenly my other cousin was not really talking to me anymore, and suddenly. And it didn't matter what political stripe you're on. And suddenly some of my friends who would regularly have events with me annually or quarterly were stopping. And these are people that I used to be able to joke with about politics one way or the other. And I was like, man, it's weird. And then people I respect in other industries and other things, I was like, man, they have a completely different vision of what's happening right now, or I have a completely different vision of them. And I was like, how can people who I respect, I think are super smart, super intelligent, how can we be so radically, different, seeing different things? So I wanted to understand, right? And so then I stumbled across this book, which we'll talk about in a second, which the goal of the book was, the name of the book, just to give you a touch of it, is The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And the idea behind this book is not to convince anyone that one political view is right is one and one is wrong. The book was sort of like this idea that actually people just have different moral perspectives, and these moral perspectives lead you to lean one way or the other in things like politics. So anyway, the book's not really important to the topic. But what was important to the topic was I wanted to get together with friends, and I wanted to use gaming. Here's where we bring it back to the show. I thought maybe gaming could lure people together, because I felt like if I called up several of my friends from different political backgrounds and I just said to them, hey guys, would you like to get together at my place once a month and talk politics? I don't think that would have flown. Craig, would you have come to that?
I wouldn't have, because I don't really particularly like those kind of conversations when they get contentious.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't have happened. And so, but I felt like if I said, so I called this thing in my head, I'm always thinking, I like alliteration, Craig. It's sort of a thing.
Russ, I knew that about you.
So I called this thing Dice with Discussions. It's not Dice and Discussions, because that would be D&D, which is a very different thing. This is Dice WD, DWD, right? Dice with Discussions. The idea is, complicated. Could we talk, right? And so I thought, but I didn't want it to turn it. So a couple things. I thought gaming would lure my friends together because I'd invite people that I knew had very different political backgrounds, very different political ideologies, all voted for different candidates. I tried not to weight it one way or the other. It was 5 people, so some side had an advantage if you think of sides, but we had moderates in there. We had very left-leaning folks, and we had right-leaning folks. So I thought that would be good, but I didn't want it to be like, and I didn't think it would work if we just sat down and talked about the issue of the day. So I was like, well, let's try this book. So what if, we gave the group sort of a reading assignment. So I sent an email to my friends and I was like, look, hey guys, what do you think of this crazy idea? Dice with Discussions, once a month or so, once every other month, once a month. Let's try one at my place. Do you guys want to take a look at this book? Maybe we read the first, the book's 3 main sections. Maybe we read the first section and we get together, and for a half an hour or so, we talk about our thoughts in the book, and we keep it focused on the book, right? And then after half an hour or so, maybe it's only half an hour. What's that, Craig?
Because the book does not cover contemporary political issues.
No.
It's a moral philosophy book or a moral psychology book.
Right.
that looks more towards why people incline toward in one direction or the other. So you're not getting into the trap of, as the book says, like your impulses take over, and all of a sudden you can't talk about what you're talking about because everybody's too invested. And so it's not a debate club, really.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be like, hey, this month we're going to talk about abortion, and next month we're going to talk about immigration, and next month, no, because then people would come like preloaded with the desire to change your mind. And I didn't want this to be like a change your mind thing. I wanted this to be, hey, can we share? Can we just share and understand, right? And is it possible for people to have completely different political viewpoints, but still agree? And I thought the gaming was required because we'd all be like, well, you know what, if the first half hour sucks, at least we can look forward to the game. Right. And if people get uncomfortable, just like drop it, let's play the game. Right. So I was like, that's my plan. So I was kind of nervous about this. I think I talked to Craig about it before I sent the email. I'm like, Craig, this is my crazy idea. And Craig's like, okay, I'm in, I think, right. Cautiously optimistic. Right.
Lukewarm. Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm not going to name my other friends because I don't want to get them. Like, I think the climate's so tough right now that even if you tell people you're going to talk to other people, some people freak out. Right. So it's like, it's an interesting time. Let's just say. So I'm not going to name anybody because I don't want my other friends to judge anybody or be disappointed they weren't invited. I will say, if we were one of my friends interested in political discussion and topics, let me know. I reached out to one other person who I've had great debates with in the past. I know it's the other side of the aisle before I sent to more people. And I said, what do you think about this? Would you do this? Because I wanted at least one person who was reasonably committed, who was definitely, on the other side, because Craig and I are pretty close politically, right? So I was looking for someone that was a little different so I could make sure that, because I think that would help someone else to get another person in from that side of the aisle to kind of, and he was like, yeah, definitely. This is my jam. I like this kind of stuff. And I knew that about him. I was pretty sure I'd get him because he likes to debate and he likes to talk. And I was very clear, though, this is not a debate. This is really just understanding. He said, sure.
But his interest in debate made it more likely that he would be interested in this.
Yes. Yeah. So with him in, then I got confident. So I sent an email out again to everyone I was inviting. So the 5 folks, including myself. And I said, hey, it's Dice with Discussions. What do you guys think? We pick a book once a month or once every other month. We read the book. We discuss the book. It's kind of like a book club. But the book would never be about a political issue of the day, to Craig's point. It would always be sort of about political philosophy or maybe a different area of politics, or suggested last time was like a historical book that gives us context for a time. And maybe then we all come back and talk about which founding father most makes sense to us, or if World War II, which side was right, or what things came out of the Great Depression, that kind of stuff. It could be those kinds of things. But it's not contemporary. It's not like arguing about it now.
Right.
So we picked the book, and I was surprised. Everybody was kind of like, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Now, first there was a little trepidation. They thought I was going to try to do it on the podcast and record them. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't. I never thought that. I thought that would not be a good idea. One, it would turn the show into a political show, A. And B, that would definitely be, it's awkward enough just to realize you're going to talk about your innermost beliefs with friends, never mind someone recording it. So no. So don't do that, DDT. But yeah, so, you can if you want to do a political podcast, but just warning, there be dragons. So they all said yes, and we picked a date, and I did have one kind of I could tell this person wanted to come, but they never said no, but they never officially said yes, and they waited right to the last day, and then they couldn't make it. Now I want to leave open the possibility, that something came up. I'm sure it did, but I also feel like I could tell from the beginning he felt weird about saying no or yes, like it was on the line. So I can see this as a challenge. But so Craig, at this point, before we go into like how it went down and what we did, what was your feeling at this point after we had the initial email exchange and it started looking like this was going to happen? How did you feel about that?
Well, I've had the other kind of conversation with everybody who was invited at one time or another, even though I kind of avoid those and I don't particularly enjoy those. I've been involved either, sort of tangentially at different times with those conversations. So I knew that I could have those conversations with all these guys, but I wasn't really super eager to do that. And so knowing that it was going to be more talking about the moral psychology book and sort of like just the way people's brains work and sort of stay away from our own personal individual brains as much as we want. I mean, the conversation, it was a lot more free ranging than I thought it was going to be.
It was,
which turned out to be very like a pleasant surprise. I thought it would be an unpleasant, like if it did that, and it wasn't, because the framework of the book allowed us to talk about these things in a more clinical fashion, which at several points during the night, not only did people end up, I mean, I don't think anybody necessarily changed anybody's mind, and nobody tried to. All we were trying to do is explain, well, this is what I mean when I say this, or this is what I mean when I say I feel this way. And there were a couple times where I went in like guns blazing, thinking, oh, I know exactly what this is going on. And then upon reflection and hearing other people's arguments and thoughts, I really felt like I could see it from their point of view, and their point of view made sense, knowing where they were coming from, which I thought was a really, really exciting moment for me, because I like to think of myself as as an enlightened person, and a person who can kind of see all the different sides. And at first, what I saw was, oh my God, I'm seeing that I'm doing exactly what we are trying not to do. And then listening, I saw these other points of view very clearly, and although I might not have agreed with them, I understood I understood, and this is how I have always felt in political discussions until this new era that we're in now, which is my friends on the other side of the aisle are trying to get us all to the same place I'm trying to get us to. We have different paths, and that's sort of, and there's a given that there's good intentions along the way, right? And I feel like we've lost that. And I'm not on Facebook. My wife is on Facebook and sends me lots of screen caps of the kind of things that are happening in the wild west of Facebook. And I know that there's not a lot of willingness to give the benefit of the doubt and good intentions and things like that. And things are devolving into Nazi and hate and all this stuff. Without any sort of attempt, like, oh, you're so evil that it doesn't matter why you think the way you think, because it's an evil thought. This book really opened up for me the concept of that morality is not this straight and narrow path, that it's more of a messy, chaotic tangle, and to unweave it, you can see like, oh my God, like when I understand where you're coming from, that point of view no longer seems like it makes no sense to me. And I had several of those moments last night, in addition to a couple moments where we took a test. One of the guys brought an online test that he almost laughingly brought. Turns out it was an awesome conversation starter, because we all kind of took these tests, and the questions from the test really launched us off into a bunch of different tangents, several of which were the more serious unpacking than we intended to do. But it was really enjoyable. And I found myself conflicted once I started looking at my answers, going, oh my God, that's not actually how I feel. Why would I answer that way, knowing that that's not how I feel? And it was really kind of an eye-opening experience looking in the mirror as well. I thought it was, I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, I think what's interesting is that's I'm glad, and I felt the same way too. And to kind of bring the gaming part back, I thought this was interesting because Craig mentioned the test that one of our friends brought, and I think everyone was, so remember the original format I shared, and kind of bring it back to gaming and gamering. So a couple things that I think helped us for people being gamers, right? One was the lure of the game. So everybody really likes to play with these individuals. We're all really good friends when it comes to gaming. We love each other at the table. Like, these are all like, I mean, not to brag, but these are some of my friends that are like, if you get them at a table, you're just going to have a good time. Doesn't matter what the game is. Doesn't matter how bad or good the game is. These are all the kind of people that just kind of role play as they play and have a great time. And you know you're going to have fun. So the added bonus was, we're all different political stripes. We know we're going to have potentially a difficult conversation, but we also get to look forward to one of our favorite gaming groups playing together. So that's my first tip is, if you happen to be fortunate enough to be in a large enough group where you know some people who literally one of their favorite things to do is play games with each other, they're also from different political stripes, that will help you. The second thing is, because they're gamers, they immediately wanted structure and rules and gamification of the discussion pattern. Yeah. So it was really interesting because I was kind of like, I was trying to leave it open because I didn't want to make it too strict. And I also was nervous that if I took too much control of it, it would almost be like, this is Russ's plan to convert us to his way of thinking. And I wanted to make sure that it was really discovery for me. I mean, if there was a selfishness to it, and there kind of was, I wanted to understand the other side and B, have me discover. I really had no intent. I kept telling myself, your job is not to persuade. This is, to Craig's point, this is not debate club. There's no plan to convert anybody, and you might learn something. So be prepared to be converted, but don't, so that was one thing. But the second part was they wanted structure. And so several of the guys kept asking me, how do you want the format to work? Do you want to have like the talking stick? Do you want to have, should I bring one of these quizzes? And I'm looking at the back of the book, and it's one of those books that are written by an educator. So it's got each chapter's got a chapter summary, the main points. And so I was kind of thinking, well, worst case scenario, we're covering 3 chapters this time. I'll flip to the end of each chapter, but I think the other thing to think about is share the ground rules. Now with this crew, I thought I'd be okay without having specific rules for no yelling and, stay on target. So I didn't really have those, but I was prepared to add them. So as a gamer, I was prepared to do the flux rule where the game would add complexity and add rules as you went along. Yeah. So then it got interesting. So as Craig pointed out, everybody said they're going to come. We had one last minute cancellation, but it was fine. So we're still going to have a good group of 4. And one of the guys was really excited to come, but he had a last minute family thing. He was going to be at a half an hour to 40 minutes late. And I'm saying, no problem. We'll just put a filler game in because, gamers. And my original plan was that I would save the game for the end and do the discussion first, kind of get the discussion out of the way. By the way, also, I had bought a lot of snacks. So, I'm trying to encourage you to come, bring nothing. Don't get stressed out about this. So I had bought some snacks, some crackers, cheese, sodas, had everything. So you just show up and hang out, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, I was going to do the game at the end, but I'll do a filler game in the beginning. Maybe then we'll talk for half an hour. If it gets awkward, I'll break out a more in-depth game that you have to think about and get your mind off the debate. So, and I'm like, what should I do for a quick filler game? And then I'm looking around and I see a game by Smirk and Dagger called Tower of Madness. And I'm like, what game better reflects the current political climate than a game called Tower of Madness, where the more and more you seek the truth for a topic, the more and more insane you become? That just seems exactly right for this political climate. So I'm like, I'll set up Tower of Madness. So, I was getting nervous, and here again, this was nice because I really wanted this to go well. I really wanted to learn something, and these are close friends of mine. I didn't want anyone to leave offended. I didn't want anyone to leave pissed off. I didn't want anybody to be like, man, this is why I don't talk politics, because this is just bad, right? So I was kind of nervous about it, setting up the game and going through the motions of prepping for a game. I got my mind off it, and I got really relaxed. And so I was nervous, and so my friends started coming in, and Craig arrived, and another one arrived, and the third was going to be a little late. And I was like, man, this is awkward because I know we all want to talk, but we don't want to talk before the the 4th person gets here. So I know, let's start playing the game. So what's great is the game, even though we're really close friends and we play games all the time together, it completely broke the ice, got us back into gamer mode, right? Kind of, I don't know if it worked for you, Craig, but I just totally lost track of the fact that we were about to have a serious discussion. Then the 4th guy shows up. We had literally just died the first round in the tower. We're like, deal him in. Let's play another round real quick. Played another round. So I would say, I loved playing the game first, honestly. So I would say, have a filler game ready to go and start. Now, you don't want to play an epic game that's going to take 4 hours, because by the time then you're going to be tired. You want people to be awake. But I would play a filler game first, Craig. What do you think? Did it help break the ice and keep everybody cool?
Exactly. I 100% understood where you were coming from when you explained your first concept, where you wanted it to be sort of like the reward at the end for the hard work, so to speak. But I thought it worked great because what it does is it reinforces the actual relationships that you're building on. Right? It reminds you that these are your friends first and foremost, and you know them. You are familiar with them. They are good people. They are fun people. They're friendly people. And it really, I think, because a couple times it never got contentious. No one ever raised their voice or anything like that. But it did brush up against some very, very serious topics. And I think it could have gone another way if we hadn't had that sort of refresher course in friendship to start with, like that. The tone was set because of the game that the games that we played, and it was like, okay, so we're gamer friends and we're just chatting, as opposed to, okay, guys, this is going to be heavy and then we're going to play a game. So I came out of that situation, out of that feeling that this was definitely the way to go, was to play the game first to set the tone for the group.
Me too. And I think going forward, and the good news was, I say that the good news was no one ever yelled.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit, some of us raised our voice, but we caught ourselves. Like,
right.
You could tell when people were getting a little bit passionate. And here's the interesting thing. So we were really trying to stay focused on the book. And I will say this, I don't think you obviously choose whatever book you think will work for your group if you're going to try this crazy idea. And again, I want to repeat the one I chose. And it is a heavy book. Don't get me wrong. This is a heavy book written by a social psychologist. This guy, he references everything known to humanity. It's clearly designed to be written to be completely defensible in terms of research. If you like this sort of thing, I think you'll love this book. But if you don't like a heavy book, I can see, it might not be for you. But if you go a route of a book, I would say this. What worked for this book particularly, I think, and Craig, you tell me, but again, it's The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. The first third of the book is dedicated to explaining, and again, I'm not going to try to sell you guys on this. You got to he spends it almost 100 pages leading you slowly to this theory. But I wanted to share this part because I think it mattered for this discussion, which was it spends the first third of the book saying basically, whenever you hear a concept, your emotional reaction is so much faster than your reasoned reaction. You almost always react emotionally first. Mm-hmm. And he has this very simple analogy, which we use continually throughout the night, which is your psychology, your body, your mind is really a rider and an elephant. And the elephant is your emotional response, your moral response to whatever you hear. And the rider is your rational response. And the problem is the rider generally goes where the elephant goes because he's so big he can barely control them. And so even if you're really thinking really hard, your emotions take you where you're going to go. And this concept was helpful in this case because I think all of us were prepared for that. Like the very first thing we said was kind of like, so do we all agree that there's this emotional response that happens first? And we're all like, yeah. And that was cool. Because I think if someone rejected that premise right from the beginning, it'd have been tougher. And because the entire group was like, yeah, we were able to do that. And as we started getting passionate, we would actually say like, oh, that's my elephant. And the person across the table would be like, I see that. And my elephant doesn't react to that the way yours does. Why is that? Why do I feel that way and you don't? And why do I react more strongly to this other thing that you don't? And it was really, Craig, was that helpful for you? Did that framework really make it a little calmer?
I think it made it a lot calmer. And I felt it myself several times where I would have a gut reaction to something somebody said. And I'd be like, no, wait. Oh, wow. I just like once you're aware of it, I think it actually makes it easier for you to pull back a bit on your reactions and get a more clinical, more reasoned response. And like I said before, I didn't feel like anybody was changing their own mind because of that framework. But what it did was it gave you a framework for discussion where you can be like, I'm really sorry that I just said that. That was like totally, I got my elephant just went and flew off in another direction. And let me try to explain why I think the elephant, went in that direction. And it gave you a framework of discussion that, again, put a layer of distance, of cushion, maybe distance is the wrong word, because I didn't think anybody was ignoring their feelings, but a little layer of cushion between what was happening, what we were discussing, and how we were feeling about it. And it just really gave a very convenient framework for the discussion that sort of set it apart from your immediate emotional reaction.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think also because we're gamers and we'd already played a game and we're kind of in gamery mode, it was almost like in the back of my mind, it was like a game. Like, can I spot my elephant? Like it was almost like the book gave a framework for us to like focus on these sorts of things and keep us, to your point, Craig, we were all sharing some very intimate feelings. And we shared some very, interesting backgrounds with each other and some really reasons why we feel certain ways. Things that I would definitely want to share in a gaming store. So do this in a private location. Right. But I think also I was a little bit outside myself as well, like watching for that elephant, like, okay, here's my rules, like almost like a gamer, like here's what it's a game. I gotta answer this question without letting the elephant out of the, take too much control or can I spot my friend's elephant? Right. And it was really interesting. So I don't know that it doesn't need to be, I'm not trying to advocate this particular book, but I think I will say, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I will say that a book, any book, gives you a framework to stay focused on. And several times when we did veer a little off, because once in a while you can't help but make a simile or metaphor to something. Now, like, for example, we said, like, this elephant thing real. Can you think of a real world example? And of course, that's the cat out of the bag. I'm sure listeners right now could probably think of like 10, right? And as soon as you start talking about those things, all of a sudden, boom, you're talking specific political issues. And to use the framework we just discussed, your elephant is now reacting to specific words and buzzwords and topics from that issue, and you may not be as rational as you hope, and all of a sudden you're arguing, right? And I think that helps. So if you and several times when we got a little outside of bounds, one of us would always go, to come back, and that sounds like your elephant, and we're like, I see what you did there, and it just lightened the mood immediately, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would actually say for the most part, it usually didn't even get contentious that way, where somebody was like, oh, that's your elephant. It was more like, well, the reason I just said that was because of and it was almost like,
yeah.
You were taking ownership of that momentary lapse and saying like, wow, I just realized what just happened there is because I think very strongly about this. And what you said sounded like you were talking about this. I reacted to something you weren't even saying.
Right.
And it, again, it was all about the framework. Whatever book you choose, as long as it gives you a framework for this discussion, I think it's a great way to go about structuring it.
Yeah, and I think I agree, and I think the best part of the evening for me was, and I think going forward, I can imagine when we get good at this and we've got it down and we've done a few of these, I can imagine a point where you start with a filler game to break the ice. You talk about this thing an hour or two, and then you play a nice game at the end to kind of wrap it up, especially if for whatever topic that week is particularly light or whatever. But what made me really pleased was that, we ended up hanging out together for like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
And, we played the game for maybe 45 minutes, and we really talked for 2.5 hours about some very deep issues. And about an hour and a half in or so, I started noticing several times where we were laughing very hard and belly laughing. And it was almost like about an hour or so in, it's like, holy crap, we're actually having this discussion and no one is upset. It was almost like we all kind of realized at some point this was going to be okay. Right. And then at the end, we're all like, so does anybody want to do this again? And we're all like, and one person's like, yeah. Oh my God, we all want to do this again. That's awesome.
Like nobody to be the first person to say yes.
Right. And then we're like, cool. What book should it be? And so this is interesting too, because it was a big not debate, but it was kind of a discussion what the book should be. Do we want to finish this book? And the answer was, I don't know if it's kind of heavy in the middle, but it was a topic at the end I really wanted to do. So I was like, can we do that? And then Craig had a good suggestion for doing a historical book, the book 1776, which I thought was a really interesting angle on this. So if you're not someone who's into psychology, right? Because, I think as Craig said, the book framework's more important than the book itself, to give you some gamery rules around this, right? So like a psychology book works great, but also if you take a historical book for something way back in time, like 1776, you can see that as a framework for talking about the then, but there's a lot of issues then that are the same as they are now. So you can go back into that period, but you're not talking about current politicians. So maybe it's less, emotional kind of thing. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like anything that's, detaches you from current time, but helps you relate to the current time and get into those details, I think is helpful. What do you think, Craig?
I'm looking forward to it. I think Dave was the one. I think one of our other friends is the one who said that a historical novel.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. I did recommend 1776 because I had read it not recently, but it was a really good book that I really enjoyed about the run up to the Revolutionary War. And I like it because, again, it's something that's going to give us a framework that we can retreat to if something suddenly comes up that is more topical or more, that sort of touches on your elephant in a regretful sort of way. You can always retreat back to the original framework that you're talking about, which in this regard would be that sort of a historical novel. At the same time, I don't know if it's really going to start the same kind of conversation. because especially 1776 is not like, unless we have a secret royalist in our ranks,
Royalist
is not really going to have that same danger, which I don't know, might be a good thing. But I think it's more interesting if you have something to talk about that some framework that you can retreat to. Like I said, if things start to get too real, to put it one way, I think that's really what makes this work.
Yeah, and I do think having said that, I think the historical book's gonna be a lot of fun, but I do think I can imagine Craig in the go forward meetings will still occasionally say, "Oh, elephant." I think.
Yeah. I think that gave us a vocabulary.
Yeah, I think you want to look at psychology. Maybe the other thing that's nice about an educational book like this is, our one friend brought the test, because this is a book that's used in a lot of education. There's tons of, tests that are designed to engage conversation and start conversation in the classroom, which is a great, you go to the internet, you download, you have it. So I might look to at least a scholarly book, so you have that framework. Right. It doesn't need to be this one. I would say what I intentionally avoided, your mileage may vary. You can go right into this. And I'm kind of wondering if this kicks off and we end up doing this very regularly, I could see graduating to this level. But at this point, I think I intentionally stayed away from any books that advocated a particular political stripe or political position, like a book about why progressives are the way to go, or a book about why libertarians are a way to go, or a book about why conservatism is the way to go. Because that would, A, it's going to immediately, to use our framework, affect people's elephants. And B, it's clearly I'm trying to persuade you in a particular direction. Right. Yeah. And then all that would happen would be, even if you made it to a next time, then it's going to be someone else's turn to pick their favorite book that pushes their political opinion. And you're going to be spending the whole time either getting frustrated by it, because it's unlikely you're going to be swayed by one of these books. So you're going to, so I would stay away from that unless your group gets to the point where
that might be what your thing is,
Maybe it is. That's why I stay away from that, because I think it would also have been a tougher sell for our group. It's like, oh, great, I got to go listen to a libertarian talk for an hour or whatever. So I think I think the framework is where I would start. But look at the ones you think would appeal to your friends, and go from there. But I do think, to Craig's point, the secret sauce to all of this is the gaming. Get gamer friends in there. It gives you an excuse to get together. And I love Craig's point. When you play that game first, it reminds you of who's in the room with you, why you like these people, and why they're your friends. And maybe there's an opportunity to learn a little bit about them, and you can share something about yourself. And we can all, and I think that shared understanding is the way we can help to work together and agree on some of these things that seem so disagreeable in this day and age. And I think it can be brought together with gaming. That's the whole purpose. That's the whole point of this crazy episode, right, Craig?
It is 100%. But having said that, I think there's a valid caveat that I don't think this framework is going to work if you have a friend who, let's say 3 of your friends all roughly agree or they're agnostic, and one friend is that guy on Facebook who's tearing everybody apart. It's not going to be that. I don't think this framework is going to be like, let's bring him back into the fold, because there are people who I think have just bought so much into the division that's happening right now that they have for some reason they have a stake in that division now. They're part of their identity is in that division, and there's no interest really in trying to understand each other. And I think this could actually be a huge disaster if you try to use it as kind of an intervention, so to speak. I think it worked. I think this worked and is working and is such an awesome thing because of the individuals involved, because we all know each other and have known each other and know each other to be good people foundationally, that we're always willing to give that benefit of the doubt that I spoke about earlier. And without that, I think this could be more of almost like a dangerous thing to try to do. If you have a friend who, clashes wildly on Facebook, but at least you can play 40K with him, once a week, and everything's going to be fine because you pretend that he's not doing what he's doing. This may not be the next step,
Yeah. I think that's actually a really good point. We did talk a lot about, once we had agreed to do this and we had the first time, we're like, boy, it would be nice, because the one gentleman didn't make it. Right. So we're like, well, it'd be nice to have another perspective. Do we know any women who like to game and would like to join. And it's the other thing, we want gamers, right? Because I think the game is part of the magic and makes it a little more relaxed. And we do know some female gamers, obviously, but we also wanted to make sure they're more balanced and from different sides, right? And then the other thing would be, so do we know anyone like that? And, or who do we want to invite? And who is open-minded enough to not, become vitriolic, right? I mean, that's really the thing. Not that we all don't say things we regret once in a while, but those folks. And I think Craig's point is that's the thing. If you've got someone who you don't think, who you no longer can be civil with for whatever reason, this won't fix that. No. It's more for the folks who, the people that I thought to invite were people who I'm still really good friends with. I still talk to, I still hang out with. We just don't talk politics, right? And I was trying to figure out a way to kind of talk politics again in that way, or
diffuse the environment.
Yes, or diffuse it, and so we could talk about it in sort of a, I don't use the word safe space because that kind of implies that's been turned into don't say anything, that might offend. And intentionally, we wanted to be in a place where we could accidentally, or even not intentionally offend, but be honest, right? And sometimes you might not feel you can be honest because you're afraid to offend somebody. So our rule was, and another thing too is, if you feel like it's helpful to write rules, like, treat it as a game, like here's rules, must be honest, may not raise your voice, remember we're all friends, count to 5 before you respond, whatever you think be helpful for that group, and evolve them. Right. But I think, I do feel like, and Craig and I talked about this a bit. I think gaming shouldn't be used to push a concept or push an ideal. I think gaming can be used to, it's always the best part about gaming. The thing that I've always loved about gaming my whole life is that it brings my friends together. It brings people together. It brings families together. And you can meet new people. And I think, so far we 1 of 1, 1 point is not data, but we got 1 point. And so let's try it again next time. But I think it could be a way to get some good conversation going on some difficult topics. If you think about it a bit.
Yeah.
So anything else, Craig? Whew.
Nope. Well, the one thing that I was going to say at the beginning, and I didn't want to spoil anything, is what it really did to me. And I talked of course, Karen was waiting with bated breath when I got home.
My wife had passed out, so but she did want to know the next day.
Yeah. But what I told her was like, what it really did was remind me what good friends these are, because I mean, we're going to play this role-playing game off-site, every third one of these and every second one of those. It's really hard to get these guys that were the core group, and I have sort of 2 core groups, right? I have Russ and my friends from high school through college and that are still all friends now that we love playing games when we can get a chance. And then I have the group that we sort of built through that early Necromunda League into Daka Daka and beyond, right? And so this is sort of like, I mean, because Russ is there, for me, it's sort of like the melding of both of those groups that have become very important to me. And I really enjoyed it because in this environment, even if you don't talk, this is why I didn't want to get into it so that we could talk politics. I wanted to get into it so we could get to a space where I'm confident that these friends who are really important to me know that I'm not a bad person, right? And that they know that I don't think they're a bad person. We don't have to talk about politics once we step out the door. It's such a charged environment now, and people are so free on Facebook to talk about all kinds of stuff, which I guess is great. I think it's awful, and I've been, on record saying that since long before any of this happened. I think it's just horrific, and the oversharing is just horrendous. But I think it's a charged environment, and you're like, wow, like I read what you wrote on Facebook. Is that really how you feel about me? Kind of thing. And that can be a very hard conversation, which then will engage their elephant, and they're yanking in one direction, and then your elephant's yanking in another direction, is to use the framework yet again. With this, it was sort of like a safe framework, to overuse the word, in which to engage at this level where you can be like, you know what, I can see where you're coming from in these foundational, non-triggering topics. And thus, because I can understand that, I can give you that benefit of the doubt that used to be so much easier, in my opinion, to give. And it really kind of diffuses the situation. And I mean, at the end, it was kind of awkward because everybody was like, okay, well, that was interesting, because like Russ said, we shared a lot, and there was some raw emotion going on, and there was like, well, I don't agree with that. I don't think I think like that, and that, not yelling, but it was very strong opinions, and we came to a really, really great place in the end, where I feel completely confident that these are my friends, that I wasn't wrong, that whatever might be said on Facebook doesn't really reflect, at least from this small group of people, what's going on elsewhere. So I loved it. I felt like I was engaged with these people, unlike anything that I've felt in a long time. And I look forward to doing it again. I hope that a historical book will give the same kind of feeling. And it may just, towards the end, I was like, I feel good now. I think we should just game from now on. But that's not really what we're trying to do, and I totally get that.
No, but I think we could. Well, one thing I think where you were going was I'd like to get to a point where, and the first one, I thought it was good that we didn't have any games down and no one was on their phones and there were no distractions and we're looking each other in the eye and being open. But I do think we could get to a point where you could play a game while you talk. I think once you get comfortable, it could be like, hey, let's break out a nice longer game, but maybe not too deep, right? So you don't have to constantly think. And you could be playing a game. I could totally imagine doing that, like, for lack of a better example, like with hearts or spades or Catan or something, right? Yeah. But when you go to other games, you could do that as well, right? So I think that'd be fun, and I think you could get there. I don't think we're that far. I don't done it once now.
Anybody should do it the first time.
No.
I really think you need that framework.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for listening and letting us share this with you. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you give it a try. I think, I think it's more important that people talk to each other and be open and honest with each other and hear what motivates other people and why they think the way they think. It's more important to do that than to convince them of something. And because once you understand the person, then you can share what you think. And then I think you'll be surprised how much sharing what you believe and understanding them does to set you up in a place where you can actually have an interesting discussion instead of starting with the issue you want to convince them with. So if you're interested in trying the exact same thing we did, not saying it will work for you, you might want to adapt it for your group. But if you are, the game was Tower of Madness by Smirk and Dagger. And the book again was The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. It's Haidt.
Yeah.
And there you have it. We'll catch you next time in the very next one. Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.